and I remember going through it, reading it, and this is going to be a good book. And so here we are, and I can't be happier. But to talk more about the book, I'm going to be calling Sangeeta ma'am later, but I'll first introduce our guest, Zakka sir, who's the managing editor, CNN News18, and has been recently awarded the Best TV Anchor of the Year award. Congratulations, sir, and thank you so much for coming. We look forward to having a great discussion with you and sir. Sumit sir, who has been a graduate from London School of Economics and Queen's University. He is currently working as a political advisor in the British Embassy Kathmandu. But today I'm introducing him as the author of Wake Up Ali, Wake Up Now, and we look forward to hearing his views. Thank you so much for coming, sir. Now I'll hand over the mic to Sangeeta ma'am. She is a former journalist, a former pilot who has many books under her name. But what I remember the most about her is Mrs. Kaur telling me that, oh, she's a multi-talented woman, I tell you. So ma'am, please, I hand over this mic to you to introduce the book.
Happily. So, thanks, Sam. So, I got this book only last evening. I also, that's the published one of my books, and that's how I am in this community, in this room. So, I got this book.
Is here.
So, I got this one. I got this book last evening for a book read. It's a solidarity between authors and the publishing community. We kind of like peep into one another's works, perhaps. So I got it and I read it in one flow. So the story is, in that sense, eternal. Human angst, urban angst. The story of a protagonist who's uprooted, de-alienated, moves into another culture from his comfort zone. And of course, existential crises, questions. Most of us in this era, the knowledge era, we do recoil. It must have happened even earlier. We do recoil into ourselves and ask questions of our identity, what is the meaning of our lives, our purpose. We have questions on relationships, on our own behavior patterns, so that self-analysis continues, which is also a theme in the book. So some key words, of course, you do remember Camus because of the existential questions. More than that, I thought of cultural psychology when I read this because it's a story of movement in that sense. Moving immigration, movement, not under very pleasant circumstances, moving under duress, somehow getting into a new culture, very vulnerable. Sort of an erosion of old relationships, trying to adjust to a new environment. So cultural psychology posits that all human experience is the product of interaction, a reciprocal interaction between culture and psyche. The way our spirit can handle our environment is how we experience things. I imagine that I'm a part of, I'll take a couple of more seconds, maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes. Maybe perhaps I'm a part of a traditional community which it has a support system. And then when I'm uprooted, I do get immediate backing. In terms of a traditional, it could be traditional myths, beliefs, faiths, rituals. The community supports you if you're a part of a traditional setup. But for modern man, I think the vulnerability is much higher when he finds himself completely alone, lost, not just externally but internally also. And there's a lot of conflict in terms of relationships. That's all of human existence. It's our relationship with the environment, which includes human beings, of course. So it's a very heartfelt journey. It's also a story that I felt can be placed in any milieu, in a milieu of moving populations, in a milieu where you decide to move away from an old precept and try something new, your circumstances could be negative, positive, mostly negative here, and then how you find yourself. Therefore, in my opinion, his story could be different, and we'll hear more of that, but in my opinion, it was the growth of the protagonist going through all his ups and so many upheavals in the mind and physical, emotional, everything, eventually comes to a conclusion and he says, come on, reconciliation. You come to terms with your situation yourself, you grow, and then there is the wake up. Wake up now. Instead of being mired in the same orbit, moving in the same orbit, move out, liberation. That's how I saw this story, and you will have, I will hand over the mic to the floor here, and there will be a discussion, an interaction more deeply on the book, and you will hear what Sumit has to say, and of course we hear Zakka's interaction. With that, Shamai Mehfil, the floor is yours. Well,
thank you very much. So I'm Zakka Jacob. I work with CNN News 18. Sumit and I went to college together 20 years ago. So this is one of those times when you feel how old you are. And I guess it's the same thing for him as well. We're both guilty of not being in touch since college, and I was just telling his wife, I think the only time we met was when I'd gone to Kathmandu. That was again 10 years ago at least, and we had met for a drink. And her first question was, why wasn't I there? So, yeah, it's just, providence that I guess brought both of us back. I was, until this morning, not sure whether I could come because my daughter was unwell and my wife is traveling. So I messaged him last night saying, I'm not sure about it. I'll let you know in the morning. Thankfully, she woke up fine and she went to school. So that's why I'm here. So you have Zanel to thank for more than anything else. Actually, the person that we need to thank actually is a common friend called Pradeep. I think he's the only common friend that Sumit and I have. He's probably the only guy we're in touch with both from Loyola commonly. So he's the guy who made this happen. So without further ado, let's talk about Wake Up Ali, Wake Up Now. First things first, Sumit, this story obviously is the story of Ali, a middle-aged man set in Lahore in Pakistan. Why did you want to set it in Lahore in Pakistan? Because generally authors, and particularly for their first book, they're always drawing from their own childhood, their own experiences, places where they grew up and so on. To the best of my understanding, you've never lived and worked in Pakistan. So how did this idea of setting your character in Lahore come about?
Thanks, Zakka. I think, when I was in Canada during my second master's at university, I had this opportunity to meet people from Pakistan, from East India, a lot of people from diaspora, right? So, and I also had this opportunity to listen to their Pakistani stories. And what I found common on them is how these stories, the plight of the migrants, belongs despite being in different countries, on different cultures. What is the common thread that binds us as a South nation? So I always wanted to bring this together, and that had been possible through the representation of these actors from Pakistan, from India, from Nepal. So you find other characters as well from other countries. So that was.
So just to understand this, the story of migrants, the story of people who've been displaced from their home countries, migrating whether it's to the US or Canada or the UK, such stories have been told before. So what makes Wake Up Ali, Wake Up Now special or different or stand out from other migrant stories?
One thing I guess is fundamentally different in this particular book is a lot of many things have been written that sort of talk about the alienation once people travel from one country to the other, the emotional cut down of their relationship with the But one specific thing that I have been trying to point out is that the modern man that we call modernity and certain age, which is in a place that is negotiating. It's in the verge of disintegration. When I say in the verge of disintegration, means it's been the modern man regular lives has been captured by the injection of biotech, artificial intelligence. We have seen the proliferation of social media. The writings that were done till 1990s, 2000, there was not much of discussion on these issues. And what I'm trying to say is that are we heading towards that direction that in this modern man is the verge of disintegration? Is there any way that we reclaim the modern man? Or is there nothing that can be done?
So let's talk a little bit about Ali. Obviously, at the time that he's forced to leave his familiar surroundings, his home, it's not like a 20-year-old who's just out of college and going abroad for better opportunities. This is the story of a middle-aged man who, by force of circumstances, forced to emigrate. How does that? I mean, first of all, why did you choose a middle-aged man's story? I'm sure your publishers would have sometimes said, why did you make Ali a 25-year-old character? It might actually sell well. Make an Insta reel out of the guy or something. But first of all, how is the migration that somebody who in his 50s is to do? I'm presuming it's much harder than when you migrate when you're younger, because you're more set in your ways. And in this case, he's a clerk, a civil engineer clerk, who I guess in his 50s would have been very set about who he is, what his ways are. How did that come about?
Well, I think migration these days is not limited to his, and I think his own circumstances, particularly their family, middle class status, is the primary reason behind pushing him for the migration. But then, if we delve more into the stories, then we'll find the other side, why his wife would have wanted to go abroad. That comes towards the later part of the story.
Yeah, we don't want to reveal the. I wanted to ask you about Ali and his love. The love that he. I wouldn't say it was a loveless marriage. I don't know if that's the idea you had. Certainly, there was love between Zara and Ali. Maybe not visible. Maybe not what we call traditional love. But you start off this character as someone who thinks to himself that he should have been a loner, right? And then through the course of his story, he comes around to the conclusion that man can never be a loner. So talk to us about that evolution. How does that change in Ali's mind?
Well, I think the first chapter itself outline, which is the first chapter, Search, is a process where the protagonist Ali is trying to search his identity, who actually he is, by exploring different facets of the emotion that individual has, and also portraying the kind of relationship that he has with his wife and with his other circumstances. So that Ali goes in as a loner trying to find himself. And then second chapter, if you go to the second chapter, it's all about experience, that's what it's thinking. Then he goes to Canada, he meets people from different countries, he experienced so many things. Then the third chapter talks about love between Ali and Rhea, and then the fourth separation. And then later on he comes to understand that it's not the interaction of people alone that makes difference in life. But having gone through the interaction and knowing that ability to live alone is also fundamental to living. That's where he said was there. That's how he started.
In the bit where he's in Canada and amongst the experiences, he finds love. So this love between Ali and Rhea. Again, I don't want to paint it as a stereotype, but I'm sure many people would have asked you about this. I mean, in India, Pakistan, love story is the ultimate stereotype, right? So did you think about it when you based Riya's character as someone who had come from India, or it just so happened? And how do you respond when people ask, "Ye India Pakistan story kyun nahi chahiye?"
I think you're the first one to ask me.
Okay.
But I never had this on my mind that when I wrote about Riya as a character and I'm writing on India. All I wanted is to have the representation of India, representation of Pakistan, and this characters like that.
So how do you then describe the love between Riya and Ali? Because ultimately they were both products of their own respective circumstances. They come there because of whatever happened in their lives, and I don't know if it is accurate to call each other the love of their lives, because ultimately that love does not prevail. So what is it about this elusive love that authors seem to always go for it?
Yeah, I think that's the right word that we have picked up. I think this love is something which cannot be defined. It's a byproduct of the circumstances, a byproduct of their individuality, byproduct of their emotions, the way they were going through at a particular point of time. I don't know if I'll be able to ever define it. It's just a flow, I guess, and it's part of being human.
Because we are conditioned, especially in the subcontinent, we are conditioned to look at love a certain way, and if this, whether it is religious background or whether it is cultural upbringing, is it circumstance that brought Ali and Riya together, or is it also that all of these barriers that we build are actually in our minds? At the end of the day, we're just human beings. I mean, we may have a lot that's not in common, and we also have a lot that is in common. But ultimately, the barriers that divide us are in our minds more than physically there. Is that why you chose to bring the two of them together?
I think they interacted really as human beings rather than any of the barriers that we carry as individuals. Despite they're from different countries and different cultures, different religions, they simply interacted as a human being, and their circumstances and their emotions that brought them together. And it's again the emotional and conditioning that helped them to celebrate as well. Right? That's the one.
So I'll come to the end where there is a nice twist. I don't want to reveal the twist because obviously you want to keep the twist in the book. But if you look at the various I wouldn't say love affairs, but the different women who've been there in Ali's life, from his wife Zara, and then later on you introduce his college love interest, and then of course there is Riya's character. You haven't mentioned much though, or at least I didn't seem to find it, about the relationship between him and his daughter. Is that again you deliberately sort of avoided it, or is that not material to his life story?
Well, for this character, I think he was only symbolically mentioning that he had a deep-seated love for his daughter, which was not displayed, but because that was not the intention, my intention at least, to portray him like that. Precisely because I think this character is engaged more in his emotional and sentimental turmoil rather than his relationship with the author. If you look deeply, I think every relationship that he has picked up throughout is very guided by the way this individual is, and the way this individual has evolved over the
So let's now come to the part where he finally decides he's had enough of Canada, and he's coming back to Pakistan. He's coming back to his wife and his child. And there is like I said, a surprise, a twist there, and I don't want to reveal what that twist is. But when so what is the change that goes through Ali when he comes back and when he hears what he hears? Again, I guess you can't say what he hears, but how does that redefine him as a person, and how does that redefine his idea of love?
So his initial interest to to go to Canada was because he wanted to be alone of his wife. Later on, when he went to the relationships in Canada, and he once again realized that his relationship with his wife was much better than the process he went through. And then he started having a nostalgic feeling towards his family, his community, his country. And that was the reason behind he wanted to come back. And what happens to his life after he comes back? Again, that event facilitated this protagonist to rethink about the entire relationships with his family, with his community. It was good for me to come back. Should I have stayed there in Canada? Was it good for me to do that again? So, the events that happen, the different kinds of events that takes place in this like the protagonist, compels him to think and rethink about the relationships that he had with his family members, community relations.
There's also, even though it's not explicitly said, at various points there is also guilt, right? Guilt of not being a good husband, guilt of perhaps not being a good father. And when you talk about love, you have to talk about either betrayal or heartbreak. But that guilt, towards the end, he realizes was also in his head. It was a construct that he had made, and in that moment, when that final confrontation happens between Zara and Ali, that guilt also vanishes. So is it human, is it cultural conditioning that we are taught to think of love and betrayal in a certain way, or is it that, because it just disappeared in a moment from Ali's head that he had emotionally broken Zara's heart, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's natural that we carry that guilt and that was the projection that I was trying to make from this character. There's a little bit of guilt that all of us carry in our lives, doing things, but then we are also equally smart to sort of allow that guilt to dissolve as and when it's required. So that was the projection.
So and finally, as the story winds up, obviously this is a journey of self-discovery for Ali. What is the one big thing that he discovers about life, about love, and about who he is?
Well, I think the biggest discovery that he made is that though he had multiple relationships with his wife while going through different ups and downs, ultimately he remains alone. Whether he is with his community, with his family, and with his nation, wherever he is, on whatever geography, location, either Canada, US, or Pakistan, or in India, our vision is alone. The more that is realized, the better it is to adopt yourself in the process of living. That's what he also carry. And towards the end, he also questions, with the new inventions, are we able to sort of relive our life without any fakeness of emotion, with the real relationships or such? Are we able to do that as we the words of new ways, as we are in the words of redefining ourselves as a human being, as a postmodern? Can we reclaim that? That's the question.
Just a couple more questions about your journey now as an author. And you said you took 5 years to write this book.
Yes.
So tell us, for a 100, 110, 120 page book, why did it take you 5 years?
Yeah, because you tend to engage in multiple activities.
Sure.
For example, like work. And then I was in Canada when I started writing there. I was a student. My kid was born there, and I have my responsibility. But then I was also not well placed or evolved as a fiction writer. poets primarily. That's why the evolution of myself as a fiction writer took a bit longer. And I'm just starting up. I have a long way to go. I still feel that some of the skills that's really required for the fiction writer I don't have, and it's going to take more time. And unless something sparks, and I don't feel like writing, it takes a lot of time for me to get into that space.
So hopefully your second novel will be less than 5 years.
Absolutely, I think I've already started writing.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, I've already started writing in Nepali. And I work with the concept first, and then characters. These are there. Now it's the point of writing it down.
So this book too was written in Nepali and then translated into English. Talk to us a little bit about that. I mean, is the essence still captured when it gets translated into English, or does it get lost in translation?
Yeah, no, the translation has been done superbly. It's been done by Sushil Acharya. The Nepali version was written 2 years back and was published in Kathmandu. It was from us, meaning migration. And once it was translated, I thought that the Nepali version even I didn't find the publisher, I so created myself. And the English version, once it was translated, my good friend, so he helped me out, he connected me to energy, and they were happy about the content, and that's how it
So for you as a writer, is it easier to convey your ideas, your characters in the language that you grew up with, rather than a language that you learned either back from the school?
Yeah, it is. It is. I think I write fluently in Nepali, and interestingly, I had grown up in a family which has a lot of influence in the field of politics and literature. So my, the elder brothers of my dad, they have been quite a good name in Nepali literature. So my uncle used to tell me, whatever you find, anything that's referred as something that has won Gyanpith Puruskar in Hindi Sahitya, pick that up. And we, in our house also, in his house also, we have a huge library, a lot of Hindi literature books. And I have read quite a lot of Hindi literature books. And with that, Nepali gets more sharpened, and I feel comfortable about that.
So do you see this as an avenue for native language authors? Because the stories are so much more beautiful when it's in the native language. Does this open an avenue for you? For example, you had an event in Chennai, you're now here in Delhi, but Ali's story is universal. It's something that someone can relate to wherever they are in the world, particularly in the subcontinent. So does this open an avenue for native language writers, whether it's in Nepali or Bengali or Malayalam?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does. I mean, it gives you space to carry the story and talk with the audiences to many parts of the world. And this is happening in Nepali literature right now. Buddhist Albers is one of the writers of our generation. His book has also been recently translated and has been published by Penguin India. There's a lot of translation that's coming out, so it does give that space for the writers from different languages to interact with the large number of audience.
Right, so with wonderful first book, many congratulations again, and we hope to see more of Sumit Sharma, the author. Not just fiction, maybe non-fiction as well, but I don't know. I guess that's you're bound by your work not to write non-fiction now. But yeah, surely more characters like Ali, definitely more authors like you.
Thanks, Zakka. Thanks, and it was wonderful to meet you after so many years, and thanks for being here. I hope to write fiction, a couple of fiction first, and then perhaps move on to non-fiction. As Atul has been insisting me to write non-fiction also. But I'm extremely thankful to each one of you who have attended this event. Extremely thankful to we have one of the Hindi literary figure with us, Raj Kamalji, Jayantudha, everyone, Rajesh Mishraji from
each one of you. I'm extremely thankful. So thank you for your time. Allowing me this space.
Cheers once again. May do very well.
Thank you.